All right. We're going to go ahead and start because there's a 10-second delay in the video. And what you're seeing right now is, well, this is our first live broadcast, God help us, and of the Practical Politician. And what we're going to try to do is to go ahead and have a half an hour with our guests here today, David Norton on the far left and Max Greene on the right. These are the Libertarian candidates for Auditor, David Norton, and Sheriff Max Greene. And there we go. Yeah, we're live. We're live now. Okay. So basically what this show is we're going to have a half an hour of interaction with our guests. And this week's subject is the open door laws, Washington County government, and your money. And first off, we're going to go ahead and start and do a little intro. David, please go ahead and say, your qualifications, talk about Libertarian.
Okay.
How do you want to do it?
First, I'm going to ask those 4 questions just to get why we're Libertarians out of the way and how we got into this party.
All right. Why aren't we running as Republicans or Democrats?
Okay, what I would say is the Republicans and Democrats is who got us into this mess.
Right.
And by this mess, I mean nationally and in the county. We'll talk about the county later, but nationally, from George Washington through Bill Clinton, that we had 42 presidents that ran us up $5 trillion in debt.
Right.
Then George W. Bush, by himself, added $5 trillion in debt. He doubled the debt of all the presidents that went before. And now Obama has ran up $7.5 trillion in debt.
Right.
They've gotten us into wars without the constitutional way. They've reduced our civil liberties.
Well,
a lot of things.
But what does that mean for us locally? This is more of a local show, even though we're like worldwide or whatever. What does that mean locally?
Well, locally, I've always been a Republican.
Right.
And then, like I said, nationally, Republicans has just spent us nearly bankrupt, and then the Democrats has finished the job.
Right.
Locally, it has been the Republican Party that has wanted bigger government, more spending. They've proposed at least 3 different taxes that I can think of. And so locally, the Republicans are the big tax, less liberty, bigger government, more spending party.
Right. Well, Max, how about you? Why aren't you running as Republican or Democrat?
Well, I'm running as an individual on the other outside. I'm not a normal politician. I'm not a normal sheriff candidate. I haven't had 30 years of experiences in law enforcement and anything else. And I'm not running as a Republican because the Republican Party has pretty well left my ideology. They say the platforms of the Republican Party is what I believed in my entire life. But when it comes to reality, the party isn't backing up the planks it was built on. And you look and see what the smaller government and the less spending and less intrusive and all the things that the Republican Party once claimed they were for, and against the Democrats, evil Democrats doing this and that. It's all morphed into one thing, any way you look at it, as far as the party platforms itself. As far as running against for sheriff as a Republican or Democrat, either one. I'm running against good people who've done the same thing for 30 years, but I think 30 years of the same thing is not going to help. It's not going to help. We have to do something different. We have problems out there that we need to address, and I'm here hopefully to be an alternative to the same problem, same solution, same mess.
Well, there you go. And why aren't you running as an independent?
Well, I think a lot of people I've heard people ask that question. Well, to run as an independent, there's 2 problems. One is it takes 200 signatures in this county to run as an independent. And each independent person would have to have 200 signatures.
Right.
So, but that's not the real reason. The real reason is, I think the easiest way to say it is branding. Why do people vote for the people they vote for? People vote for people they don't even know because they have an R by their name. Right. Or they have a D because R stands for something that they like. D, I don't think the Republicans and Democrats go through with what they claim that they stand for or what they used to stand for. But there's a brand. So you can just put your name on the ballot as a Republican or a Democrat, and people will associate you with that brand. And they'll think, oh, he has an R by his name, he's for lower taxes and less spending. Or he's got a D by his name, he's for freedom of speech and personal liberties. You know, whatever people associate with that. And so if you run as an independent, you run 1 or 2 times and you're campaigning, and people, you have to persuade them of your whole platform. And then if you get tired of running, somebody else decides to run, he has to start from scratch all over again, right, building a brand. So libertarian already stands for something. Less government, less taxes, more freedom, the business, government stays out of your business and stays out of your private. So that's like, that brand already exists. Why not put my name with a brand that I align with that party? So
right.
Why gather 200 signatures when I can just attach my name to that brand?
Right. And there's a structure. There's a support structure. How about you, Max? The same thing, or?
Well, as the libertarian, it gives you a ballot access, which, like David said, you don't have to go out and get your 200 signatures to do this. And like even the other parties, to say you're libertarian, you don't mean you necessarily believe in everything that the Libertarian Party has for a platform it stands on.
Right.
The same as a Republican or Democrat. I mean, they'll get out there and say, well, I'm for this or I'm for that or women's rights or whatever. And they may differ from what the most party platform, but the big part of it is whether in general, you feel that the major issues, the majority of the major issues you can agree with on. And I believe to be less intrusive politically and be out of your face, and I believe in a lot of that. I don't believe in 100% of legalize everything and some of the other stuff the Libertarian Party may have for a platform, but I do believe in enough of it that I believe I can not be selling them down the river too bad by running as a Libertarian, because the Republicans aren't doing what they say they were as a party anymore either.
Excellent.
Right. There's diversity. Like Republicans goes from Ted Cruz to Rand Paul to Mike Huckabee to Chris Christie to Mitt Romney. You have a lot of diversity within that brand. Right. Everybody doesn't have to agree, but there's some agreement. Likewise for the Democrats, it goes all the way from Evan Bayh and Joe Donnelly all the way to Elizabeth Warren and Barack Obama. So right. That covers a lot. Just like with libertarians, people aren't familiar with us, and people might think we're all perfectly agreed. And definitely, there's lots of fact, but we're all agreed there's too much government, too much intrusion, and government needs to back off, shrink down, cut our taxes, get smaller. So we've got like broad agreement, but we disagree on some details. I mean, we have diversity of opinion here.
Right.
And that's fine. We're agreed on what we're going to do at the county level, though. That's important.
Yeah, well, that's, like I said, it's a more of a local show. Libertarians approve of a lot of things, but some people disagree with.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Well, somebody was like bringing up something that I approve of this or that. He couldn't believe, something, and this. Just to get it clear, because a lot of things are said about libertarians. And here's the easiest way to say it. Libertarians do not approve of everything that we think should be legal. And I think that's not true of the other part. There's a lot of people in both of the other two parties that think that if they don't like something, they ought to be a law against it. I don't like this, let's pass a law. So libertarians, I think I've seen a lot of diversity in libertarians, and there's some very extremely religious libertarians, homeschoolers, fundamentalists, and it goes all the way to atheists. But the whole thing is, whatever we believe personally, that we don't want the government to make everybody that disagrees with us a criminal. So I could have very conservative religious views, but that doesn't mean that I want the government to force that on other people. So just because you heard that, oh, the libertarians approve of this or that, no, libertarians don't even agree on, we have diversity of religious opinions and all the way from secular to religious, but what we agree on is that what our neighbor's doing that isn't hurting us is not our business. We can have opinions about it. The church can preach about it, or your church cannot preach about it. But we just believe that what your church does, or what your family does, that we ought to stay out of our neighbors' families and churches. Let them believe what they want to believe, and let everybody run their own family, run their own life, run their own church, leave other people alone, as long as we're not harming anybody.
Right, harming, even, members of your family or something of that nature.
Right.
But yeah, as long as you don't hurt your community or the people around you,
Right.
then, there really shouldn't be astronomical laws against it, so to
Right.
speak.
Right.
So
just because we think it ought to be legal doesn't mean that we approve. I mean, I don't think people should smoke pot. I don't smoke pot. If it was made legal, I wouldn't smoke pot. I have doubts about medical marijuana, lots of claims.
right,
But that doesn't mean that I want to take people that smoke pot and put them in prison for 5 years. I don't have to prove I'm against something by throwing people in jail. That's all I'm saying.
well, and then that causes a lot of stress in the community, so to speak, where a lot of money has to be spent. We've already spent $9 million on a new jail,
Right.
250 cells. About 1% of our total community can fit in that jail,
Yeah.
and we're spending astronomical amounts of money on that just to do what? I mean,
It's more than twice as big as the number of inmates we have now.
right,
So a lot of these issues, it comes around to your pocketbook too.
right,
It's like, well, yeah, we can make something illegal, but people aren't going to say, well, how much is your taxes going to go up from making this illegal?
right,
And a $9 million jail, and they're still talking about adding to it,
right,
and that's a lot to put on people's taxes.
right,
And they have to put all of the taxes to pay for the jail on basically the working poor.
right,
If you're on welfare, you're not helping to pay for this jail. If you have a lot of property in this county, you will not pay a dime to build this jail. They have fixed this so it's only people that are earning a living, working, and do not own property are going to pay for the jail. And nobody has spelled this out, because they think that people that live in trailers, people that rent apartments, that they're uninformed, they don't read the paper, they don't vote, let's put all the taxes on them. And this has not been reported or discussed, and this is part of the problem. We got two parties that are just like Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and you don't hear any discussion of the real issues. And so that's why there needs to be a third voice to bring up the voice of people that nobody's speaking for.
right. Now, Max, go ahead and make your little pitch on why you're running for sheriff, and then we'll get to the meat of the discussion.
Oh, well, I'm running for sheriff because I believe the problems in this county need to be addressed that's not being looked at right now. It's kind of nice to say I got 30 years experience and I'm a good guy and I'm pretty vote for me, but we have a big problem with heroin and meth, especially heroin now coming to the community. It's a problem. It's not the same. I never did agree with people smoking pot and having pot, but after the alternative, pot's nothing compared to what's out there getting their kids nowadays. And we pulled our kids out of school so we didn't have to have them on Ritalin and other drugs, and it's like, well, you protect your kids by taking them out homeschool and taking them home. But that's not the case now. Now, I mean, you got your kids out there 18, 20 years old trying to fit in with other people in the community, and with peer pressure, what it is, and with these drugs that just don't give you a second chance. I mean, once you try these things, that they change your brain chemistry. They got you. A lot of young people out here throwing their lives away. The 21 to 30-year-old crowd, it's it was nice to be able to think at one time that, well, I can spot a heroin addict a mile away because he got a tennis shoe on one foot and a flip-flop on the other, and he lives under a bridge. That's not what, you look around and see the kids that's graduated from high school in the last 10 years, that's what a heroin addict looks like. About a third of the kids out here, they're using this stuff, and it's getting a hold of them, and it's hard to get the monkey off their back. And we as a community got to go forward, and we got to get together. The police department ain't big enough to fight it by itself. You have to go forward. You have to get the community involved. The people have to believe in you again, that you're not there just to take their kid down and throw them into jail so you can fill your cells. You're actually there to help their kids, and you're wanting to get the pushers and the dealers off the street and give your kids a chance at life. And I think that to do that, to get the community behind you, you're going to have a ethical oversight board that the community sets on to say, that's not it may be legal to do this, but it's not ethical. And, example of the Indiana said 0.08 is the legal limit for alcohol. And they've been prosecuting and persecuting people for less than that limit for a long time. And you can't do that. Here's the law. If you're running 45 on the highway and the speed limit's 55, you can't get a ticket for it. You shouldn't get a ticket for it, but that's not what they're doing with alcohol. And make people the bad guy because that's easy pickings. And now their excuse is, well, we're going to improve the public safety by doing more of pulling people over for suspicion and persecuting for under the limit alcohol consumption, and in general just feel good about we're saving the community. You're not going to save the community if you don't stop the drug problem. If you can't get this heroin under control, you've done got to turn into Detroit 15 years from now. It's going to be commonplace. Every kid on the street's going to have a bag of something in their pocket. We have to stop the problem now, and it has to take the community involvement to do it. And you don't do that by assaulting the people, putting on little military uniforms and running around fully automatic weapons and kicking down doors and getting tanks and all that other good crap to do it with. If you want to play with military toys, you need to be a military boy. You need to have the stones to set up and join the military and do this and realize that these are American citizens we're dealing with now. Well, you're not in some third world nasty. You got to come back home and deal with the public. And you got to treat the public in a way that they respect that you would feel that you've earned by serving your country. And you don't want the cop pulling you over at the gunpoint for a $125 ticket. You don't want that shaky hand threatening to blow your head off over a $125 speeding ticket. It's not right. You have to treat the public with the respect that they deserve in order to get them to help you to get the bad people off the street. That's why I'm running for sheriff.
All right. Okay. Well, let's go ahead on to the main subject of the show here today is the open door laws, Washington County government, and your money. Okay. And the way we stated it is we found, okay, by developing Indiana Proud the way we have, and having a video of the government meetings and, just having it up there where, the open door laws are being observed and you're seeing what's actually going on in government. It has taken over the years a lot of the slack, so to speak, out of our spending government-wise. It used to be that they just come in, or they wouldn't even come into the council or commissioner meetings. They just, get, departments would just get money, right? And so at one point years ago, we had a surplus of like $3 million, I think. And then over a matter of like maybe 2 or 3 years, that it was all gone, and now we're in the red. So that's really my interpretation or my thing of it as far as like the open door laws. By having open government, by observing the laws of open door laws and being open with the public, we save money as a community. It gets opened up for bids, money gets spread around, you don't pay as much for the services that the community does need. So I don't know, I may have just deflated the whole thing. We've had such great discussions. I'd like to see jump in on this, David.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think exactly when you were talking to me about running for auditor.
Whoops, there we go.
Got a shaky table here.
Yes.
When you were talking to me about running for auditor, I was thinking, what, I'm like, I've had certain interests. I ran for commissioner.
Right.
I had definite issues that made me want to get in that race.
Right.
There were freedom of the people in the county, liberty issues, rights to property that, I wanted to do something to preserve what came down to us from our forefathers, from my dad's generation,
Right.
that these things I learned in civics class about what America stood for. Rights, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, freedom, how we were different than the communists,
Right.
and so and I just seen over time freedoms be chipped away, and that government regulations and having to go to the government to get permission for every move you make just chipping away. So that was like how I got into, and I would try to recruit other people to run for commissioner.
Right.
And then when there was I think this was about 6 years ago, there was a Democrat and a Republican that each won their party's nomination to run for commissioner in my district. And then after it was done, I had 2 people from both parties that were for the exact same thing. So I had no choice on that fall ballot. There was nobody I wanted to vote for. Then I saw, instead of trying to get other people, and instead of trying to run, so I'm going to get, if I want somebody to vote for on the ballot in the fall, I'm going to have to run for commissioner.
Right.
That's how I got started. That's why I joined the Republican Party. There were other reasons. That's why I talked Rhonda for 6 months.
It took 6 months to be for me to be a libertarian. Yeah.
To get her to come over, and then I was thinking, how does this all relate to the auditor? Because the auditor doesn't set the budget, doesn't set the spending, doesn't levy the taxes, and then. In everything we've done, and with Rhonda, with Indiana Proud, taping these commissioners' meetings and everything, and then I realized that openness of government has everything to do with taxes and spending. Now, if you notice, like the Congress, when they want to spend money, when they want some skullduggery, when they want to do favors to their friends, they write a bill in a back room. A handful of people in secret, and then they bring it out at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And then they vote on it, a 2,000-page bill, at maybe 9 a.m. the next morning, when nobody's had a chance to read it. And we've seen this in local government. Yes. When they want to bring out something, they want to write a bill. We saw that with the Planning Commission writing the zoning ordinance. They had a whole bunch of subcommittees having secret meetings, and when people asked to go to them, they were said, no, you can't come to this meeting. This is not for the public. And then Rhonda filed under the Open Doors Law.
Well, actually, Max did.
Max did.
Well, yeah, wasn't it?
I don't want to take your credit. I didn't know, but Max did, that they were having illegal meetings. Well, rather than opening up the meetings, they just shut down all of those, and they didn't write those parts of the zoning ordinance. They would rather not write the ordinance than do it in public. But they had this one part, and they argued that the agricultural part was a private meeting because they had hired a contractor. And even though this contractor had been paid $15,000 by the county to do some work on the zoning ordinance, she said that what she was writing and what they were discussing was her private property. And even in this subcommittee, that a majority of the Planning Commission was meeting with her in this subcommittee. So you basically had the whole committee was meeting as a private entity because they had paid her $15,000 and pretending to be privately writing a bill so that they could bring it out. And as a result, lots and lots of time was wasted, because then after this was rolled out, Then it all had to be discussed in public, and it took months. And if they had just had this stuff, and they had lots and lots of meetings that were public meetings where nothing was done, except people speaking for and against. But they could have had all of their discussion that was in private, in public, and probably would have come out somewhere where they were anyway. But secret government is expensive government. When you see like earmarks, we read in Congress that they do earmarks and they don't know who put the earmark in the bill.
Well, they do that locally. They do that locally here too. There've been a lot of like one bidder contracts, and an example would be the insurance.
Yes.
Before they didn't take bids. I asked for bids for years. We need bids on this insurance, health insurance, for years. They kicked it off. They kicked all the employees off. They were paying $15,000 per employee on average. I mean, not every employee had insurance, but of all the, it averaged out to $15,000 an employee. They kicked them off, gave them $5,000 of income to go ahead and purchase insurance off of the Obamacare exchanges, right? Which saved the county a bunch because it was getting out of hand, right?
Well, it's $1.5 million, but there's $500,000 in cost overruns.
Right.
So the year before was $2 million for insurance, and then the next year, they just paid them $5,000 ahead, just cost the county like $600,000, but they had to recoup for the overreach they'd done the year before.
Right.
But they did actually take bids this time, or have taken bids. They haven't did anything with them, but they took bids, and when you actually get bids and you get 5 insurance companies competing, now the average bid is like $900,000, $920,000. But 2 years ago, the minimum the county had to pay was $1,500,000, and that still wasn't enough. They had cost overruns.
So I think
you save like 30% minimum by getting a bid.
Right.
And by having no bid contracts and single bidder contracts, which are tailored just for one individual, and especially the contracts that they know better than to bid on because they come forward and they get treated like crap in the public meetings, and you can even see on tapes examples like the ambulance services, other services that wanted to come in and said, we'd like to give you a bid too. We'd like to compete in your market, and we'd like to show you how much money we think we can save you and how we can treat you, and they didn't even want to hear it. And but now the county's taking that ambulance service back on their own, which may not be a bad deal, but you can't chase away all your other competitors just so that there's nobody you can't compare apples to apples anymore. Apples and coconuts don't do quite the same thing, and say, well, you're getting a good deal. It's always best if you can get enough to compare at, and then say, well, and there are times where you're going to say, we're going to go a little bit more expensive and do it local. And the law allows in certain cases for you to spend up to 15% more on a contract just to keep it local. And in a lot of cases, that's a good thing if you can keep the money in a community instead of having everybody that comes in be from Alabama, and that's where all the dollars are going to go. But you still have to put it forward, and this is what the going actually price is, and this is how much we can get it for, and is it reasonable to do this or there someplace else? And like you was talking about, well, what's the reasons for becoming like the auditor? But the auditor sits in all the meetings that are executive sessions, and the auditor sits in for the commissioner, and they can sit in for the council as well. All the executive sessions, and see that they are being abided by the open door laws. The open door law says you can only have executive sessions for certain situations. Some of it's active pending lawsuits, not lawsuits that you're thinking about filing someday, or you may or may not get into someday down the road. They got to be actually pending lawsuits, and or they have to be personnel matters where you're actually talking about discussing the possibility of firing somebody or taking action against them for some outlandish thing they've done, and where it does need to be kept private so you're not slandering a person publicly or something for something charged that may or may not be so. But they are specific things, and it's been thrown under big, instead of just a small pup tent, they've been trying to throw the circus tent over top of everything. Everything becomes fair game for an executive session, then you don't have to talk about it in a public session. The way the law is written, you can talk about it in an executive session, but you have to vote on any matter you take place in public. And we never hear a public vote on, well, we're going to go ahead and settle this lawsuit, or we're going to go ahead and file this lawsuit, or we're going to go ahead and take this under advisement and let the insurance pay off on this lawsuit and stuff. For all these lawsuits that they're talking about, every meeting they have to have an executive session. You would think they should have to someday come forward and actually do what the law requires and have a open vote saying we're going to settle this one way or another. And I can't remember ever seeing on the videos, the 6 years of video, where they ever come out and said, we've been sued for this hardly and saying we're going to settle this. I mean, maybe one time in how many years, but they play the hide and seek game and trick or treat with the public, and that's like the epitome of the open door laws is when they had the courthouse basement locked. Open doors, locked doors.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, the problem is a lot of the open door laws, the public has limited recourse of what they can do. If they didn't file a complaint with the open door counselors and dot their I's and cross their T's in a proper manner, after 30 days, even a meeting that they had the doors locked, it becomes legal. Whatever action they took, if you didn't go up there and get a lawyer to actually slap an injunction on them and say, you have to redo this meeting, it's still considered legal. And the county knows that. And that's the thing, when they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and they got their fingers broke over backwards and cloth wrapped around them and everything else where you evidently caught them, they need to come out and do the right thing and say, we're going to have a redo. That's what the law is going to require anyway. At the next scheduled meeting, we will come back and readdress this issue. And the thing is, you can't stop them from voting in a direction you don't like on hardly any matter.
Right.
As long as they do it in a legal manner, they can do anything they want to you pretty much. They just find some things to be unsavory, and they don't want to have a public vote where they come out and say, yes, we're going to go ahead and give another $40,000 to the partnership, growth partnership, after saying publicly, I will not do, you elect me, I will not give them another dime.
Oh, yeah.
And then you turn around and lock the basement doors and run upstairs and pull the curtains and vote to give them money, and then turn around and if the newspaper catches and calls you on it, but they don't go ahead and file the papers with the lawyer, with the state. So, I mean, nothing... it's a little bit of humiliation, but nothing actually ever happens. But they've changed the laws a little bit now, made them a little more strict. Like the first time you may get a free ride, but the second time it's a $100 fine a piece. And if you keep doing the same silly stuff, it's like a $500 fine a piece out of your own pocket, not the. But I mean, that's the thing. If you're doing this behind the closed doors and whatever, who knows where the money's actually coming from? It's going to pay your fine with.
Right.
If you can skim enough off the top. Who cares what the fine is?
Well,
and that's the problem. You got to back up and not do that. And for like you run for auditor, you're privy to all these meetings, and you'll stand up and say, they said something that wasn't legitimate to talk about, and I told them to stop talking about it, and they didn't. But here's the gist of it.
Yeah, that's why.
And I've called it publicly, and here it is. And part of the other stuff, you have access to all the records where you can see when somebody runs in December 28th and buys a car out of miscellaneous funds. They sat there and bargained and begged and argued. I have to have $10,000 for pencils and erasers, and December 28th they run over Eddie Gilstraps and give $9,500 for a car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I have, it was in my platform, I've stated before that if I'm elected auditor, since, I would be the secretary of several of these boards, the county council, the commissioners, and the auditor is a person that announces the meetings, and I would make sure that these meetings are all put on the internet in the same place with the connect to the community. So there'll be one place. If you're interested in county government, you can go to one place and see when meetings will be, and I'll make sure that they are announced 48 hours ahead of time and are posted with enough time, and that news media is informed with adequate information. And if anything is discussed in an executive session, since I'll be in the executive sessions, if anything's discussed that is not legal to be in an executive session, I'll say, hey, we can't talk about this. And if they continue, then I will just start reporting outside. As soon as the executive session's over, my first thing I'll say at the regular meeting is everything that they talked about in executive session that was not legal to be talked about.
Washington County is well known statewide for our antics, so to speak. And the reason that it really hurts our community, I'm not just being persnickety or mean or a tattletale or anything similar to that nature. What this actually has an effect on is our ability to bring in bids, to get qualified businesses to provide services for our community, to be able to be professional. I think we figured out that, you know, on the insurance and on a lot of things, that there's like a 30% difference, that there were other bids that came in 30% under what the bid was that was actually taken.
Well, that was the difference when there was the tornado, when there were all the
Right.
trees on the ground, and they were afraid there'd like be a big flood and wash these trees down and take out bridges.
Right.
So they had a federal money to have these taken out,
Right.
to have bids. So that because this was federal money, they had to take bids. They couldn't
Right.
do their usual thing of just telling their favorite contractor, you know, you just charge us whatever you want to charge and we'll pay it.
Right.
Because this was federal money, they had to take bids for once. Well, it wasn't the lowest bidder, and I don't even think it was the second lowest bidder, was it?
No, it was
Third lowest.
third lowest.
And it was 30% more. And that's what they chose because it's not their money, it's a taxpayer's money. And it's real easy to just be a big wheeler dealer and hand out money to your friends if it's somebody else's money. So I think from like every time that we look when they take a non-competitive bid and you find out that there was another bid they could have took, it tends to be on average 30% more. So not everything is a contract, but you can just imagine that's a good portion of your tax money is for these contracts.
Right. Well, and they my opponent actually arranged all of that for the Blue River clearing or what have you, and it was so illegal that they got into trouble on the federal level. And you know, you've got to bring everybody together. You've got to have a set of rules that everybody can abide by. It's like having a football game where you dribble the football on one side. You know, you got to have the same rules to compete in the same, you know, arena. Otherwise, you don't have a good game. You don't have a professional game, and you don't see where your talents lie. And it just seems like Washington County government, they don't really abide by the rules. It's always like, you know, look over there. I mean, well, like with Connect the Community,
Yeah.
it's a set of Google calendars that I arranged so that it automatically goes out. You know, the person or department has their own account. It can't be hacked unless somebody gives a password out, just like your email. And it can be used to announce meetings, to put out minutes, to do all of that. And because it's a Google Calendar, it'll interact with other calendars. So anybody that's interested in those meetings or all of the meetings can actually tap into it, and they can be notified by email, a variety of things. And so I arranged this like almost 2 years ago. And I know, you know, I'm a big girl. I know this stuff goes on. And finally, you know, I said in the meetings, look, you've got the new IT guy, you're paying almost double what you were, you know, let's get this Connect the Community up and going. And so I would call the IT guy, I would say something in the meetings, and then I would call the IT guy, and he just kept putting me off and all of that kind of stuff. And finally he just got fed up or a little bit scared, I'm not real sure, and he said, you know, Rhonda, even though they said that in the meetings and they voted that to implement Connect the Community, we're going to go. They told us privately, all the commissioners and all the elected officials have told me privately that they're not going to use Connect the Community, even though they took kudos for it in the public. They're going to go ahead and just, you know, not do it. So.
And where did they decide not to do it? In a public meeting?
Not in a public meeting.
In a secret meeting.
Right.
This is secret government. This is why secret government is against the taxpayer and against the people. This connect the community. I know a lot of people, not everybody is computer savvy.
Right.
Not everybody's on Facebook, but I know a lot of people, well, this is going out over the internet, so I know a lot of people watching are familiar with the internet and Facebook. And
right.
everybody schedules events on Facebook.
Right.
My nieces, they schedule birthday parties. It's a Facebook event. You get a little announcement. They invite people. I get an invitation to my grandnephew's birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody does it, and it's free. And that's what Rhonda's doing. It's not like some grand software. Rhonda just knows the internet, and this is Google. It's something free, and she knows how to do it, and she's willing to help the government. The government, that's all. Each of these groups, they could just schedule it. It's just as easy as scheduling an event on Facebook. It goes in one place. But they're using an IT guy that they're paying thousands of dollars to schedule things and put it on the internet, and it's here, it's there, it's not anywhere. They're not telling him. It's not going online. They're telling the newspaper.
Well, then you put another middleman in
the
the way
day
you
before.
can't report your stuff in a timely manner to get your stuff reported in the 48-hour window when you're supposed to be reporting stuff prior to meetings and such like that. And as long as you can say, well, I couldn't get a hold of him and he wouldn't respond in time, the Google Calendar thing eliminates all that.
Right.
And if there's an emergency comes up, you can send out a notice saying, whoa, change of plans. I said we're going to have a meeting in 2 days. It's going to be 3 days now. Mm-hmm. But you can immediately change it and send an update to anybody who is interested enough to even look at it. They can get an update saying, here, it's been changed. Or we've added an agenda item 49 hours prior to the meeting.
Right.
Yes, if they
and that makes a 48-hour deadline that's required by law, but the agenda item gets out, and that gives us the time that the state law requires for the public to be given the opportunity to be aware of before something comes up for a vote. But that gives the maximum flexibility for the government to do what they need to do and still be transparent to the citizenry and try to step up so you're including the public and not you're doing something for the public, not to the public. And a lot of times things will come up the public don't agree with, and just like with the zoning stuff, a lot of people didn't like it and some did, and different things come up, and like the reciprocal setback thing, some people liked it and some didn't, depending on who you are. If you got the big bucks, you're all for it, and if you're not, you're just average Joe out here just trying to make a living and keep your head down. You don't want to find out the prop 2 acres you bought 4 years ago waiting to get a down payment for a house you can't build on now, but if you'll sell to this other guy, he can. That's the kind of silly stuff that goes on, and that's why the public needs to be aware and know what's happening and when and how it works out. But anyway, how much did we leave out on our open door laws and the stuff that we was after? That's we didn't go through the whole thing because the open door laws, you're getting ready to have a seminar here.
Yeah.
Right.
You're trying to get lined up.
What's the date on that? It's going to be on a Thursday.
We don't know yet. We don't.
Open Door Counselor hasn't returned a time with you yet, so we're working on that, trying to get it lined up so that the public can be aware, and this helps the people who's in office right now, especially the commissioners, when they appoint new people to new boards. And it seems like it's just like Groundhog Day all over again, as Rhonda said. Every time a board gets flushed out and almost all new people get in, they start trying to pull the same squirrely stuff, whether it's intentional or whether it's they flat don't know the open door laws, but they start trying to have meetings on the internet, and they're trying to have meetings at somebody's house outside the public venue, and they start trying to vote on stuff where there's not enough so the public can't show up. And one of the examples, like the tourism board, it's a good board and it has a good purpose in life to try to promote the community, but there's been a lot of turmoil in it, a lot of overturning people, and then every time they turn over, they get set back and their feet kicked out from under them because they don't want to go forward and say, we're going to follow the laws, we're going to do all the laws. The new hotel opened up, and that meant a big influx of money is going to come to them. Well, the very next meeting, they pull it up an hour early. and then they move it to the airport and move it to different places and stuff. It's not the way it's scheduled. It's supposed to be. They're trying to get their feet under them and do the right thing now, but you can't tell these people out here and expect them to do the right thing without giving them a little bit of guidance on this is what state law says. I don't care if in another county you was doing this as a school board member. You cannot do this in this county. The law requires a notice of certain kinds and meetings to be voted on in certain ways, and it's not all that difficult. And like Tom Cyphers is working on trying to get them a little handout, just a little quickie reference thing, in which they've been needing for a long time. That follow these few simple rules and you'll be okay. But I mean, they every time he thinks he got somebody following the laws, then the boards change, and we need to get it in a situation where everybody who steps into the board is given all the tools they need, and they know if an older board member or a different board member with a higher, with more gray hair on their back starts beating on their chest, they can say, wait a minute, this ain't legal. This is what the law says we're going to do, and this is how we're going to follow it.
And this is very important, because they all think that this would be so easy to write a law if we could keep the public out, and then we'll just write it, and then we'll roll it out.
Yeah.
But look what happened with Obamacare. They wrote that in the back room, because they were like,
Oh yeah.
we can just write this and come up with something and get it out and get it passed. Well, what happened? It was all full of holes. Obama has had to delay things and change things, and they've had to rewrite the regulations to make things work. They spent billions on websites that didn't work because of how because of it all being done in secret and trying to hide stuff because it's not going to be politically popular. Whatever you think about Obamacare, if the discussions had took place in regular sessions,
right,
with people testifying openly, you could hear what they're being told. So it's like if something's done in a public meeting and somebody is testifying and saying, this and that, say somebody's from Purdue Farms or
right,
talking about turkey barns, if it's in a public meeting, you can as a member of the public, you can be there and you can listen to that and say, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right.
right.
And you can go and investigate and then come back and say, hey, what he said wasn't correct. If it's done in secret, some contractor, some, big corporate person can be telling them all sorts of stories, and they just are eating it up. That's why this needs to be in public, so when you hear something, you can come back and say, well, I did some research and found out that, and the press needs to be there.
And real numbers too, and where they came from, and all the other good stuff, and then to be able to go back and redact your numbers and change the figures and say, we should have just did one more run through before we got there to get the numbers down right the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard when you're sitting there looking at it not to be dyslexic and read the stuff backwards as you're looking at the final bill. But I mean, just like the other stuff with the zoning stuff, it got better when they took 6 months to get through, but they'd wasted like a year and a half getting to the point where they should have just went ahead and did it 6-8 months getting through and got it over with in one lick.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and then the public could see what was going on and where the intentions was coming from, and been privy to all the discussion, and then they could wade it in and see.
Well, it would have helped the board for the public to be in on everything and to know why they decided things they decided. That protects them.
right.
So you can say, you saw the discussion, but if it's in secret, you don't know that.
Well, the zoning board was brought in illegally, had illegal members on it. When they were called out on reciprocal setback. Now, this is not the whole board. This is people acting as the board, and there are certain people in there that were extremely righteous in their beliefs and put them forward aggressively, maybe more aggressively than they should have. But a lot of that, once they got called out on the numbers of reciprocal setback and what it actually meant, that somebody could buy 7 acres, put a poultry house on it, and then control 27. When it was brought out that that's what was happening, that that if somebody else, if it located on next to your property, if you were in that reciprocal setback zone, that you couldn't fix your house, you couldn't, do that, and that they were actually not only going for poultry houses to have reciprocal setbacks, but actually reciprocal setbacks from fields.
From grain fields, that would be a push by the
Oh.
Farm Bureau.
Farm
So,
Bureau,
that's
yes.
another one of the things. Good intentions can go astray awful easy.
And we could see
And then
that.
that wasn't in the public because that was in one of these secret meetings.
Well, no, it was brought out. The president of the Farm Bureau actually brought it out. Said
Okay.
we want protection too. And but during those meetings, when it started being called out, that this is not appropriate and this is not something that the public wants, then the meetings got almost violent. I walked in with my camera, and a woman says, "Oh, there's that crazy one with the camera." Well, so be it. But it was brought out in that meeting when my opponent actually, was the president, said the reciprocal setbacks means that you cannot build on your own property if you're within that setback from the owner could, the owner of the poultry house could, but you couldn't. When that came out in the public, one lone voice said, "Wait a minute, that sounds like it's going to make it harder for us to locate someplace." And it was like a hushed silence when people realized that they had been brought out on false pretenses. And it was
The whole full ramification. It sounds good in theory. Well, if I can't build there, you can't build here.
right.
And then you start looking, oh, well, we get exemptions for certain guys and certain people, and if you got the right name on the deed, you can do whatever you want in this county. And if you're just happen to be one of these poor guys that's been here 5 generations and barely got
Right.
Something or a window to throw it out of, if you was one of the 12 kids or 12, one of the descendants from one of the 12 kids from 3 generations back, and you got the short end of the stick, you still got a right to live in the county. And that's where they start going astray, saying, well, no, only the winners are going to live here, and
the losers are
out in the cold.
And you couldn't turn this guy around with a stick. You couldn't hit him with a stick to turn him around and look in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting a little bit hyper here because it was so, and
It was intense.
It was intense and uncalled for.
Mm-hmm.
And but basic, Washington County politics. That's why we don't have anyone running this year. That's why it's so hard to get,
it's kind of strange, before we had like 9 people running for commissioner and full tickets on everything, and everybody trying to waller and get in, and just a few years ago, and now it's thinned down where you got offices being uncontested, and nobody wants to try to run against them, but then you got other things where the state's kind of helping out, saying, well, we're going to make rules for the incumbents where if you don't have this training, you can't run, but the incumbent don't have to have this training.
Right.
And they start doing that, and then, well, you have to be 7 foot tall unless you're an incumbent. When the state's doing this squirrely stuff, making new laws that intentionally restrict the people, I think it's going to resonate with the voters, and they're going to realize that having an R or D in front of your name is not really the defining factor anymore. You got to be on the right side of something somewhere. And I realize that you go in there, and a lot of people, like David said before, you yank that R lever or that D lever because that's what you was brought up with, and Grandpa would kick my bottom if I didn't vote Democrat or Republican or whatever he happened to be, and boy, that's led us down a bad path, and they know they can get like 35% of the vote just off of what party they're trying to be affiliated with, but then that makes it hard on a third party. But it's the point where the third party has to say, wait a minute, there is an alternative here, and it's not the Republicrats or anything like that, where it's all been blended into one thing, where both of them just want to spend your money, and nobody wants to say, are we getting the best bang for the buck? Are we actually getting our dollars worth for the tax dollars we're spending? And to be pulling this tricky stuff like did here lately, where they've decided, being they needed another 2.6% increase in their revenues, they decided everybody's property values went up like 2.6%, whether it did or not. You know, if the bank got to loan you more money and then say, oh, well, your property value just went up, here's a bonus right back. That's not going to happen. But that's what the state, they blocked themselves in when they did the 1, 2, 3 thingy, and now this is the only way out, and I knew it was going to happen. Next year, your property values, it's probably going to be boom time, even though half the people lose their house to the sheriff sales, it's going to be a 10% increase. Everybody's property value is going to go up 10% on paper at the tax man's place, not at the bank, not at where you're going to borrow money against anything, but just
well, it's very interesting, and in these government meetings, they're always saying we need the economic growth partnership for the economy. Oh, we need to do this for the economy. We need zoning for the economy. Then you see nationally, what is that businesses are moving from states with income taxes to states without income taxes.
Right.
Then what have they done in this county? They've put in a county income tax to pay for the jail. Well, this was a great opportunity. So wait a minute. Not just a jail, it's a safety tax. It's for the jail and for other safety
that was another, that was a separate tax.
And for other things.
And then now, but you know, like Rhonda's running against her opponent there, the run saying, well, if you don't vote me in, you'll have a wheel tax. Well, every year for the last 4 years, he's been at the budget, or last 3 years, he's been at the budget meetings, ranting, wanting a wheel tax.
Yes, people are
advocating for a wheel tax, but the thing about the wheel tax is they, oh, well, this will all go for the roads, and they have to be corrected every time when somebody says, wait a minute, are you sure about that? And their lawyer has to speak up every time and say, well, technically it can all be diverted to the zoning board. Every dime of it can be diverted to the zoning board. But, you know, when you just happen to be on the zoning board and you're chanting for a wheel tax, it's a little bit of a conflict there.
Well, the other thing is, I know there's a huge vote in the Tea Party wave in 2010. Right. You had this giant wave of votes for Republicans in the county. And because of the excitement over the Tea Party that was all about the debt and spending and taxes, and in a big wave, they voted in people in the county that wanted more government, more boards, more taxes. So people are going and they're voting. I'm going to vote Republican because I'm for smaller government, lower taxes. And if they vote for Rhonda's opponent, they'll be voting for the guy that is screaming for more taxes.
The most tax.
He wants to charge you a tax for every axle on your vehicle.
No. Not an axle. Every wheel. Wheel tax.
Every wheel.
No. Get this. The spare tire is included.
The spare tire.
Even if you don't have a spare.
He wants to tax your spare tire.
Rob Jones out there is growling his old truck, you know, he's living in Orange County when they put the wheel tax in. They charged him for a spare, even though you don't even have a rim. He has a flat tire alongside the road. He has a letter set until he can get somebody to come take the wheel off and take it and get it fixed.
And this is a guy that he's mad for taxes. Would you say that of every person in county government that has run for an office, that this guy is the most in love with putting more taxes on the people of Washington County?
There's
the most tax crazy person in Washington County. He's a Republican.
He's a Republican. Oh yeah.
And people will vote because of the brand.
That's their platform says lower taxes. They haven't believed for the Republican Party as a whole hasn't believed for lower taxes in how many years?
Yeah. In Washington County, the Republicans is the big government high tax party.
Right. Yeah.
They have run this county.
Yeah.
And the jail. They had a jail that held, 56 people? Now Something it's got 90 people.
Right.
So, you know, if there was really a small government party, they would build a jail that would hold maybe 100
but
or 120
the thing is,
people.
the jails is going to generate money supposedly by bringing in other people's prisoners. Why did we risk having a lawsuit for how many years when we had 30% over maximum capacity for years? We never did send the first trustee prisoner over to another county. We never did shave off, well, here's some guys that got 30 days left. Let's send him over to another county so we can fall back within the compliance of the law, state and federal law on how many inmates you can have. Instead, we kept pushing the envelope. the county itself kept violating state law and federal law and whatever on how you could treat people and how many inmates you can have per area and whatever. And then their excuse is, if we build this many beds, we're going to be able to get all these good, nice prisoners from other counties to come in. We're going to get their trustees, and we're going to get the ones who, had too many speeding tickets or tripped on a sidewalk or something, or, Otis that gets drunk once every 6 years, and, he got locked up for 30 days, and we're going to get him, and he's a nice guy, and we're not going to get anything like that. We're going to get the outlaws and the crazies and the ones that's sick, lame, and lazy and got problems with authority and got a challenge every time you put a jailer there. You're not going to be able to leave one jailer in a position to get him hurt. You're going to have more bodies there than you are for the locals.
Yeah.
You're going to have to watch these guys because they're psycho nuts. They're the ones that's plea bargained and traded around and should have been in a federal pen 20 years ago, but they kept turning in their brother or neighbor or a guy down the street for a pickpocket or whatever to get out of the heavy crimes that they got into, so they didn't get their 3 felonies until now.
Well, and the other thing is, all of these counties, Scott County is spending $9 million on a jail. All these counties are building jails bigger than what they need for the government. And what the state government is doing, they're saying, hey, we'll just take our Class D felonies and we'll push them all out to the counties. So we're just going to be stuck with more people that would have been in the state pen. We're not going to, I don't think,
we're
not going to make money holding prisoners.
Because they're all going to be our prisoners. Anybody that would have been sent elsewhere, we're going to have to keep ourselves, basically. We're going to house all our own no matter what crime they committed. The one that should have been in the...
And the more people they put, if they fill it, that will be 1% of the county's population will be in jail.
Man, woman, and child.
That is more than the current incarceration level for the whole country.
Yeah.
So do we really think Washington County is worse? I mean, if you turn on your news and you look at Chicago and Detroit and LA, is Washington County worse?
It's getting ready to be, because the state of Indiana pulled their meth task force from Washington County and returned it with a marijuana eradication group this year. Well, they knew the meth and the heroin on the rise, and instead the state of Indiana decided to pull their dollars from their state police help, and because they want to go looking for dope on a rope, or want to send these guys in riding around the helicopter. I don't blame them. If I was a cop, I'd rather ride around the helicopter all day laughing and joking and having fun too. They're not eradicating any plants right now because they're not ready for harvest. Mm-hmm. The eradication team's supposed to go in and eradicate, like cut down the plants. They're not cutting any plants down until harvest time. It's never been about eradication. It's all about harvest. And they wait till the buds is as big around your fist and as long as your forearm, and then they'll be ready to jump down a rope, slide down a rope, and if you cover up their badges, they're going to look like any drug cartel monkeys in some third world nasty, sliding down ropes on helicopters, tying their dope on a rope and hauling it up and having a good old party time. And all this time they could have had enforcement on the drugs that's on the ground and on the street right now, the meth and the heroin, and trying to keep it beat down. But instead, all this money's going for guys to kick back jack and spend money on helicopter gas and do whatever they do. But it's not eradicating. They're not out there whacking the bushes every day. They're not cutting plants every day as we speak. Mm-hmm. They're riding around finding them, and they're waiting for harvest time. Mm-hmm. So it's a waste of money, and they're letting these kids get hooked on this crap while in the meantime. It's like calling a timeout so they can get enough people to fill the jail. That's the whole intent. From the state of Indiana's perspective, is we build these jail cells, we'll fill them all right. We're going to let these kids, we're going to back off and encourage this county to go ape wild on the heroin and meth, and we'll have enough of these first-time users to fill these cells. That's not what my intent is. I don't want as a sheriff to have to step in and start doing this to everybody's kids and still let them look the other way on the guys who's doing the pushing and say, well, he's a confidential informant for this state cop. No. This guy's pushing drugs on my kids. He don't get another free ride. He don't get no get out of jail free card. He don't get to say, well, he'd give us good information in the past. That's why he's, been arrested 47 times and never been locked up. He's going for a ride, and he got to leave my kids alone and the kid down the road, and he's not going to be doing this silly stuff. But the state of Indiana has had a golden opportunity to help keep their foot on the throat of these meth and heroin stuff like there was last year, and they made some good busts, and they made some headway, inroads into it. And now to back up, just because we've not been like Powell and we ain't had a triple shooting that you know of, it may have occurred, but somebody's able to get rid of the bodies down in the bottoms or wherever it happens to be at, you know. But it's gonna happen, and we're gonna have these little kids got to start going nuts. They're gonna start knocking old people in the head to find out the only thing in the medicine cabinet was a bottle of Viagra when they thought they were gonna get the good pills. And they don't care if they get caught a block away from the house, and they don't care what they do to these old people in the meantime.
Well,
and we've been blessed as a county not to have that kind of stuff really going on rampant when you see it happening all the way around us. You see Harrison County and Clark County, and you know, it's out there, and it's headed our way. And you know, they had a big thing on the bridge down there in Clark County with the push against heroin, and you know, where they had you know, people that their kids had died 4 years ago. Well, that same mess is heading our way, and you get to get kids started on this stuff, and there's no way to take care of it and no way to stop them. And if they try to turn somebody in, then they're gonna get a dose of rat poison, and you know, they're gonna kill them off to avoid witnesses, and it's really bad stuff. It's nothing like going out and getting drunk or you know, if a kid smoking a joint or something. But this is a whole different story altogether.
Well, we've filled the whole hour. No one texted or voicemailed in any questions that I know of, and but this is a really good show.
Well, give it a kick off and see what happens for next time. The next time's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be not us as a Libertarian Party sitting here ranting and raving. It's going to be a Democrat and a Republican commissioner candidates.
Tom Day and
Preston Shell.
Yeah.
And they're going to show up, and hopefully people will call in and have their points of view. And we don't have a Libertarian in the race against them. This is a public service thing to get their word out there for them to let the public decide who they find to be most appropriate to put in these positions. Hopefully they'll have some good messages to put out here. It'd be nice if you could, if you got any questions you'd like to ask, go ahead and ask them beforehand. If you don't think you're going to be able to call in time to make the show next week, make it as successful for them as you can. And get the kind of questions answered you want, not the lowball soft pitch stuff, but the real questions that you have that these guys can speak up for and say, here's how I really feel about it.
And if you have any questions about what we talked about tonight, you can send them in, and on a later show, you know, we can answer those. Or
right. Well, I mean, you can go ahead and you can email, or Facebook, or not Facebook. Shoot. Voicemail in. It's a phone number. It's 812-641-5483. You can leave a verbal message, or and it can be just read online, or you can text a message in. So there are ways to go ahead and answer questions, because it is a live show. You will be able to see this taping afterwards, but it will be a live show next week at 5 o'clock on Sunday. And so, but yeah, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to change Washington County. Not just Washington County politics and our government and our community for the better. This is just something that other communities can learn from. That this is not a hard thing to do. This is not an impossible thing to do. And these are the things that actually work and function and are changing our community for the better. So, okay, this is Rhonda Greene. Thank you so much, Max Greene. Yes, we are married. And then David Norton for Auditor. And I want to thank you for joining us here on The Practical Politician. I'm Rhonda Greene. I'll see you next week.